Small conference.
You've been doing that for a while, acting?
No, like legitimately, this is my first year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I quit a full-time job last October.
What were you doing?
So at that time, I was a dock worker for a local freight company. Well, a national freight company, but still, like, I was just sitting there doing that graveyard shift, and like, acting has never been something I really wanted to do. It was just sort of like, okay, cool, but all of a sudden I had voice acting kind of blended into acting, and just sort of, I've had people tell me like, you've got the voice, you got to do this, you know, and had a couple of experiences that basically just sort of defined it, where like, I have to do this, you know, and then just one day, I remember sitting over on my forklift and just going like, you know what, I really hate this job. I can't do this anymore. That's it. I'm gonna go and try doing something completely off the wall. I'm gonna go into acting, and then within an hour, I actually wound up getting injured at work, which then put me on sick leave for 2 weeks. So then I just like, well, now I'm gonna find my agent, and I'm gonna do this and go. So that way, like, by the time that 2 weeks was up, I was like, all right, well, here's my 2 weeks, and I've already found my agent and already started working. So cool, we're good to go. You know, so.
How bad was the injury?
The injury was on my left ankle, and it was a complete ligature sprain and a slight tear that when we got it checked out, they did one x-ray and went, nah, you'll be fine and it's all good. And then like it started to hurt for about 3 days. So then I actually went to a real hospital. They checked it out, and that's when they found everything else and whatnot. So it was pretty bad. Like, it still gives me some issues now, you know, but.
Are you comped for it, or did you have to pay it out of pocket?
No, got it all comped, and all that was great. But it was still one of those where, let's just say the people I was working for, they would push that envelopes with the injuries a little bit and go like, okay, whatever we can do to get you back to work is what we want. Not 100%, just to work. So.
And I feel like that's pretty common too, to be honest, especially like in that field.
Yeah.
But before we go too deep into it, you know, brief introduction. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. So my name is Stephan Watson. I'm a Utah local actor, voice actor, occasional cosplayer. Podcast. I actually own and am the founding member of a company called Cracked Brain Productions, where we put on gaming videos over on YouTube and different shorts. We used to do a lot of interaction with cons, but COVID happened. So yeah, I wound up doing that, and you know, just kind of that kind of Renaissance person where like, okay, you find something interesting, dangle it in front of me, and then all of a sudden I'm gonna run towards it. So.
Okay, is that the logo right there you wear?
Yes. So this is us, Cracked Brain, and then over on the hat too. So we're a small little group. We all basically started out as friends through my podcast, and then just it kept going, and then people would be like, oh yeah, well, you know, I've got a background in animation. Oh, I've got a background in video editing. We just sort of kind of stumbled into actually creating a company around it. So, you know, what I would say is, for some people, we're like the smallest form of Rooster Teeth. It's like we're trying our best to make a name for ourselves, but it's an uphill climb.
Can you, are you still doing the podcast now?
Yes.
Can you quickly plug it in real quick?
Yeah, so the podcast that I host currently right now is the Cracked Brain Podcast. Started out as a cosplayer interview podcast, and now it's basically just us on the Cracked Brain team talking about whatever's going on during the week. So sometimes it'll just be about what's affecting us. Other times we'll bring in news articles and things like that, or some game that we just played. Basically, we try to keep it really relaxed, entertaining, fun. You know, if you're coming to us to learn something, you're in the wrong spot. You know, we just want to go and have a good time with that one. And then another podcast that I wound up hosting, but it's on hiatus right now, is called What You Makin'. And that's where I talk to different content creators, writers, editors, video bloggers, and whatnot. So just kind of that one way, if you have a passion and you know someone out there is doing your passion, I want to talk with the people to help you get there.
Okay.
To actually help you get off whatever's holding you back and to start making it. So,
I like that. So it's kind of a launching pad for a lot of people here
Exactly.
in the community. I like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, because there's so many of us that we have passions, whether it, we want to be, cosplayers and make our first cosplay or just make a name for ourselves or streamers or whatever. There's so many people that want to do something that someone else is already doing, that if they can just give you a couple words of advice, that might be the catalyst for you to actually start, start trying. Because that's how it was for me. Voice acting, people told me forever, hey, you've got the voice for it, do it, and whatnot. And it wasn't until I actually spoke with a couple of key voice actors, and they basically pushed me into it, like, no, you are doing this, and whatnot. And they kind of got my feet wet, gave me a couple of different jobs that kind of got me in the door, and I never looked back after that. So
That's what's up. I know you're pretty new in that industry, but do you have anything that you can kind of like shout out that we can look up and see that you on? Or
yeah. So if you want to see voice acting wise, if you looked at the YouTube channel Mashed, I've been in a couple of their videos recently. Last month, I was the voice of Aku Aku in a Crash Bandicoot short. So that was actually cool because right now there's 4 official voices for Aku Aku. Well, now 3 official voices for Aku Aku. The original wound up dying, and now I'm the alternate over inside there. So I've actually been contacted by a few different parties and whatnot about like, hey, just in case, let's actually use you, and things like that. So I've done that, and then just a couple days ago, they also did a Rick and Morty short where I played Scary Terry, Snowball, Gazorpazorp, was it the Mailman? I played so many roles.
Okay.
So there's that. Video games, there's an upcoming game called Second Star where I play the ship captain, or I'm sorry, not the ship captain, the ship pilot, Shaya Deroy. So that one, is still a little bit of ways, but you'll be able to see that. And then various audio dramas and things like that. And as far as on-screen stuff, I mean, a couple of different commercials I've been in. If you look over inside the background of certain Hallmark movies, if it's dark and walking, yeah, that's probably me. So, that tends to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that. I mean, not in the acting area, but living in Utah, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier when you were talking about your podcast. You're talking about a lot of current events. And just because it's just happened, let's talk about that Black Panther stuff,
Yeah.
Chadwick, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it happened, like, as we record this, it happened last night. So still dealing with processing it all. And I can realize to some it might sound like weird, where it's like, oh, well, I don't have a personal connection other than what his films made for me. So why would I be affected by it? And it's one of those where, because of the way I grew up, and I grew up in Southern California in Huntington Beach, and there weren't a lot of black people, there either, so it was a lot of just sort of getting used to other cultures around me. I mean, we had Mexican culture, Iranian culture, Vietnamese culture, just everything there other than my own. So I never really could develop that closeness with my own. And my parents were not big into like broadcasting it or anything like that. So it really wasn't until I got older and I started I still had the same struggles as all black kids growing up over in Southern California, especially with current events now. But I just never had that close tie. So as I was getting older, these movies and whatnot not only were educational and just like, oh, okay, this is how it is everywhere else, but it also made it feel like, hey, those feelings of kind of like isolation, man, I really know how that feels. So like when you bring up something like Black Panther, that movie is so foundational in a lot of, I won't even just say black lives. I'll just say lives in general, but specifically people of color lives, because you do get that very just that you're a stranger in a lost world. You know, you really are when growing up in America, and you never really get the chance to feel like you fit in. So all of a sudden you see someone like the struggle of, you know, Eric Killmonger trying to come back to family and not fitting in, that hits you on an emotional level. But then you also see what Chadwick Boseman did with T'Challa, and you go, man, you want to have integrity. You want to have this richness and this love for everything that you have growing up, and you want to share it, but you're also afraid of sharing it. But you realize that you need to work past that. You need to actually open yourself and your history up for everyone to be able to see, so that way they can understand you. And it's that specific little thing of just like, you need to be open. You need to care more about showing other people what you can give than just keeping it to yourself and hiding it away. That's the message that I got through Black Panther. And because of the astounding performance of Chadwick Boseman, it was so palatable and so easy to just absorb and affect. And that's one of the greatest things with acting. It's, if you do a great job, whoever you've been, like the actor, whoever they've played before, goes completely out of your mind. They are that character, that person. So thus, whatever they're trying to teach you or whatever message is that much stronger. So to lose someone that has that capability, where we see films like Jackie Robinson, we see 42, you know, we see all of what he did. It's not just, oh, we lost a great actor. We lost someone that could communicate a message across multiple different backgrounds in an hour and a half, you know, and shook people to their core. So that's why, like, speaking of how that affected me, that's why, like, for me, I'm shaking, you know, and it hurts.
Yeah. No, it definitely hurt me as well, because not only was it a great film, not only was he great to tell a specific narrative, but with a lot of the things that are happening right now, I think that his film was mildly involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, a lot of people felt very empowered with that film coming out. A lot of children felt like they were now being normalized in a society that often treated them as, criminals, or someone who, if has any sign of intelligence, is like abnormal. But now in this film, it just showed all wakes of blackness, and it was a very amazing film and a part of culture that I think will go down in history for a very long time.
It really will, and something that you had pointed out right there, where the intelligence in the POC culture is seen as an oddity rather than anything close to a normalization. It's something where, for myself personally, you know, I grew up, English is now my primary language, but I couldn't speak English until I was about 4 years old. Because of my parents and where we grew up, I could speak French, German, Chinese, and Spanish. And it wasn't until getting into kindergarten, which everyone just spoke English and maybe a little bit of Spanish and whatnot, that I actually had to speak English. So then made the complete revert over to just English. And growing up, because of the way my brain kind of formed then, languages became easier. So later on, I wound up learning Japanese and wound up moving to Japan. So now it's one of those where if I go somewhere and I speak Japanese, it's, oh my goodness, you speak Japanese and whatnot. When I was living in Japan, no one cared. Yeah. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah, Kokujin. You know, it's like they knew, like, okay, yeah, he speaks Japanese. That's great. But over here, it's, oh my God, you're one of the few. Yeah. You know, and because I was also getting ready to go to school for aeronautics, it's like, oh, I'm strong in math and science. Wow, it's amazing. Whereas my friends that also went over, they were like, oh yeah, well, that's just Chad. Yeah, of course he's over in aeronautics, whatever. So that's the thing where it's the realization of like, yeah, there's always going to be people that are on the other side, you know, your criminals, your ne'er-do-wells, everything like that. And certain aspects of the culture will always be more exemplified because of, you know, whatever have you, whether it's politics or social standing. But the fact that either an African American child or a Hispanic child can't just be good at math and be considered normal. They're an oddity is so far past anything. You know, it's like, great, thank you for, you know, for encouraging me, but it actually feels pretty demeaning when I'm considered a freak because of something that either comes easier or just something that I enjoy, you know.
Do you feel like that's why you kind of aligned yourself with the comic book world and cosplaying and the heroes? Because in a lot of those stories, there's a lot of similarities with feeling like someone who is not quite the average, but also being able to kind of excel in that space.
Oh, 100%. You know, I mean, I as much as people would always consider anime as already kind of niche and fringe and whatnot, I mean, when you think back over to the 90s, most people can remember like Dragon Ball Z or maybe Trigun or something like that. Whereas when I got into it, I was watching everything. I was watching Slayers, you know, I was watching, yes, I was watching Dragon Ball, but actually like the original Dragon Ball and the actual colored cassette tapes, and they were all in Japanese and whatnot. Like, anime has always been pretty special to me. So always feeling at odds has been just part of my life. And thus the heroes that I usually kind of look for kind of have that same thing. You know, when we look at Aqualad, we see someone that passes off as human for, you know, for years and years and years, but has a half side of him that even he didn't really understand, didn't really know until it was brought to light.
Yeah.
You know, and then just kind of assumes his mantle. But always, like, he always felt odd. He always felt out of place. And even in different times, he was treated like he was out of place. You know, so yeah, always being that kind of black sheep amongst the crowd and whatnot. Yeah, that's how I've been basically felt like my entire life.
Yeah. And do you feel comfortable in that space now? I mean, you live in Utah.
Yeah.
Right now, so obviously you have to feel some kind of content from being in that environment. But what are your thoughts on that?
I do find a bit of a contentment, not because I like the juxtaposition of feeling alone, but I like being in an area that I feel alone and then finding the other people that also feel alone. And you kind of form this weird tribal feel, you know, like with Fan X, whether you like Fan X or you hate Fan X, it is an event that brings a lot of us that are into this fandom geeky type world in different facets. It brings us all together and gives us something to kind of center around. You know, so we all feel alone, but then we also know that we're not alone, which makes our bond so much stronger. You know, so that's where something where it's like, yes, I'm used to it. Yes, I kind of gravitate towards it only because I found the way to feel comfortable with it that isn't destructive. You know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to kind of switch pages a little bit. Can you talk to me about your content creation and also some of your projects that you're working on? Like, what is your process?
So when it comes to content creation, usually, I mean, just like with anyone, it comes from some sort of inspiration. And a lot of times it's not even my own inspiration. I'll look at inspiration within another person or someone that I want to affect. So like with What You Makin', you know, I'm not doing that podcast for me, I'm doing it for other people. So thus I kind of get inspired to try harder, kind of in the sense of like a teacher or coach or whatnot, of just like, no, let's do this, let's go and find it. And to be able to ask the questions or find the things that people want to know rather than the questions they're expecting me to ask.
Yeah.
You know, so that kind of process has it. But then when you flip the switch and you go to like writing shorts with Cracked Brain, we're starting to write a lot of different shorts, and most of it comes from stupid things that just show up in our brain. To kind of give an example, we wound up we've established pretty close ties with some of the Star Wars costuming communities out over here. So we kind of knew that, hey, let's try something Star Wars related. Let's see what we can do. And just, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but three of us were sitting down and we were like, well, what if all of a sudden one of the ATSTs got, it always says in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago, what if it got put on Earth now, but it's ancient? So thus you get a bunch of hillbillies that find this giant mech. What would they do with that thing, So we just all of a sudden we start thinking up ideas, and it starts going like, oh, well, the first thing is they got to make it run. So it's, of course they're going to put a Hemi in it, and then they're going to go and put some lawnmower parts in it, and we're just going to start having fun with it. And it just starts like almost like bubbling and, just growing exponentially in this way of just like, okay, my ideal will feed off his ideal, which will go to something else. But when we kind of think about it, the inspiration, like the foundational inspiration almost was never our own. It was just the fact that like, oh, we kind of know some people. Let's see what we can do with that, So
Are these animated or are these live action? Like what these shorts you're talking about?
These ones are going to be live action.
Okay.
We are working on an animated show, one that I can't really go too much into detail with, but yeah, like that one again was initially inspired by one word in a previous podcast, and we just sort of like we all saw the word and went, well, we can think of something with that, and just start building this story and this world based off of that one thing, So it's a lot of what we make is really hard to just wake up, have an inspiration, and kind of build from that. It's like we see a tag that someone says, and we just go, hey, let's think about it in this sort of, in this tense, and then we just sort of like compound our ideas based off of literally one word.
How big's your team?
At the moment, we are 9 people deep.
Oh,
wow. There's myself, Candace Chesley, who is our lead animator, does really fantastic work. She's one of the co-hosts of the Kawaii Cast podcast that we actually make, which is anime inspired. Then you have her co-host, Tyler Jacobson, great guy, love him, and one of the funniest persons I've ever known. Brandon Peck is our video editor and does a lot of interesting work that he didn't start out video editing, but just has got this passion for it, and I love to see what he's going to do next with everything that he does. Caden Tolman, another writer with myself, him and I go way back for a while, so a lot of times it's him and I up at 3 o'clock in the morning with way too many drinks into us, just going like, hey, okay, let's put this in this and let's see what will happen, so really good times there. Then we have our other artists, Ray Gill and Ethan Hunt. They're newer members that, the art that Ray does, you tell her to go and make a simple, like, I just need two of these characters and maybe take like a week to go and do it, and she gets it done in 5 minutes. And you're like, okay, how did that even happen? And Ethan, just what he does with graphic design is amazing. And then our newest member, Mason Tolman, or I'm sorry, not Mason Tolman, Mason Wright, that, how do I explain Mason? He is the world's most innocent person you've ever met. He's not exactly gullible, but everything you say to Mason, he'll reply with, and you almost want to go like, oh, that's adorable. And we love him to death. Like we've taken him over to, we've gone out to cons out over in Texas and out over in Las Vegas, and everyone always assumes that they're going to like, we'll tell them, okay, we're going to bring out this guy, he's Mason, he's innocent, and they always go, oh, we're going to corrupt him. Within 5 minutes, they're like, no, he will remain without blemish. We love him. He is our cinnamon roll, like the greatest guy in the world. And he says things that you always have to like sit down and go like, okay, now I understood what you meant. That's completely wrong, or whatnot. And we've even have a show that's called Mason Explains, where we give him words or shows and whatnot, and he has to explain it back because he also doesn't watch anything. So we had him like explain Game of Thrones, and he was like, so something about a guy with a finger, and there's dragons, and people like to have sex apparently. And I'm just like, oh God, Mason, So I freaking love him, but like I said, we're just a bunch of friends that just all love hanging around each other. We cosplay together. We go to cons together. It's the most chaotic group that you really can think of having, and somehow we make it work. So.
Yeah, it seems like you have a really healthy, passionate community that you work with, and that's rare to find anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. Speaking about where you are, can you talk a little bit more about, you touched about this for a quick second, but I bet our listeners find it very interesting. So you lived in Japan, Germany, all these other places. Can you just kind of give me a background on all that information?
Yeah, so like I said, I grew up in Southern California, and my father was part of the Air Force. So that it didn't really cause us to move around as much as just sort of put me in touch with a lot of different cultures and a lot of different languages. And then when I got a little bit older, towards 16, I wound up getting a job as a gymnastics coach. And that wound up just catapulting everywhere. I mean, we would travel all around California, and then because of the caliber of our gymnasts, we'd travel all around the States. And then once I hit about 18, I wound up kind of making a name for myself in gymnastics, to the point where I knew I was graduating high school, didn't want to stay, and try to figure out what I'm going to do in college and waste a bunch of time. So I wound up just moving to Japan. Moved to Japan, and while I was there, kind of hopscotched around to like Thailand and Laos and Taiwan, and then kind of went into Europe a little bit, more like Denmark, Germany, and kind of did that, and just sort of followed the gymnastics track that way, But when I say like, oh well, the place that I lived in Japan while just getting to do all of that. So, I'd say that I've been fortunate to be able to travel. Like I think I filled up my first passport when I was like 22. Because when you get a passport, where they do the stamps, you think, oh, we'll never fill those out. Yeah, you can fill those out.
That's a dream of mine. So the fact that you already got it, props to you.
Oh, it's an amazing opportunity, and it's a lot easier than most people think. Like, to go to Japan, everyone always assumes like, oh, I got to save up tons of money, and and just it's gonna be this big trip that I don't know if I'll ever be able to do. The first time I went to Japan, I was 16 years old, and I went with some friends, and I had to pay the entire thing, like my plane ticket, I had to pay for a hotel stay, my food, all that on my own, and I wound up just spending a year working in the high school cafeteria and mowing lawns, and got together only $3,500 and made the trip. So it's not that you need a lot of money, you just need to know how to make the trip work. Like when you go to Japan, if you're going to try staying at a Best Western, especially an American proportion Best Western, you're going to run out of money pretty quick. But if you do the Japanese alternative, all of a sudden you'll start saving money, and like first thing people start going like, oh, well, I'm going to go get a car. You're in Japan. They've got the best railway system known to man.
That's what I've heard.
So it's just like, go get yourself a month pass over on the Red Line or the JR, and you can go up and down the entire country, and it'll cost you $30 for the month. So,
offline, I'm going to have to talk to you more about this because I was supposed to go to Japan this year, but COVID.
Yeah.
So I am planning on going sometime next year if COVID clears up, and I have no idea where to go or what to do. So I bet you can help me out with that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really depends on where you want to go. Like myself, personally, I prefer the Kansai area. So that's Osaka, Kyoto, Nara, all those areas right there. Like, Osaka is, I always have to kind of say, like, Osaka is like Long Beach. You've got a big old kind of like, it's right there on the shore. So you got all the docks that are there. You got an aquarium that has a whale shark inside just the middle of it. So just beautiful, beautiful aquarium. And then it's kind of centrally located around everything else. So You can go to Kinkakuji, which is the golden house. You can go to Himeji Castle. You can go to all these different places, and yet still just be right there in Osaka and just sort of skip to Kyoto or whatnot. And then Nara, I mean, you've got Ueno Park, which is the deer park. I will tell everyone right now, as much as the deer park is fun, those deer bite, and they're kind of mean. So, it's a deer that you can literally walk up and feed, but they'll headbutt you and whatnot. But it's still really fun. They've got the world's biggest Buddha there, and I'm telling you, you walk into this. The pictures just don't do it justice. You walk into this big, it looks like a castle, but it's a temple. And this Buddha is 50 feet high, and then you just start seeing the scale of it, and it's monstrous. And even, while they're kind of taking you on a tour, there's a big old post that has like a little hole kind of tucked into it, maybe I'd say about 3.5 feet high, and you can kind of crawl through. And they tell you like, oh yeah, that's the size of his nostril. And it's amazing. So, yeah, Japan is, if you ever want to be able to go, I highly encourage, go. The cheapest time to go is October. The best time to go, April.
Okay.
So
that's what I was trying to go to, April. I wanted to see the blossoms. Yeah.
So, yeah, cherry blossoms, it's a sight to behold because the entire country is just white and pink everywhere and has this really fragrant smell. It's amazing. But honestly, even fall time in Japan is fantastic because they have these hills that just have trees all over them. So you see these this hillside of like greens and oranges and yellows that just it's almost magical.
Okay.
I love it.
You definitely sold me. I mean, I was already going to go, but I'm excited.
Yes.
So you also said Germany. Were you in Heidelberg, where the Air Force, the air base is?
So again, that was when I was later in life.
Okay.
Germany was, again, it was centered around gymnastics, and that one was kind of fun because I would go to a lot of these gymnastics academies as kind of like an unofficial American gymnastics ambassador. So it's going in, trying to help out their teams when I could, and it was interesting to go as like in my very, very early 20s because it's when you're making the worst decisions you'll ever make in your life, and you're in a place where like there's alcohol and there's people and just everything that could possibly happen. So like Germany in particular, I always say like there's a little bit of haze around Germany. Because I was conscious for about 20% of it. But it was still amazing. Just like food-wise, it was great. Wound up staying over in like Berlin, and that was that was a trip just because you wind up spending so much time learning about these places, and the effects that they've had during World War II and whatnot. But you never really, like, especially in America, you never learn what's going on before all that happened. So you wind up seeing just like towns and villages that are just like, oh my God, this is this is beautiful. Why would anyone ever want to destroy such a thing? So it's like all of that Eastern European countryside is super fantastic, and I love every little bit of it.
Yeah, no, I want to travel more, but I think it's more me getting in my own head because, like you said, like it's affordable. You just got to be able to plan it out.
Yeah.
And I think I just need to do more of that, and also find the right people to travel with because I do like traveling alone, but I also like having some kind of staple. So a lot of times when I travel, so I've been to Heidelberg before. I had a friend that lived there, so hung out with her. Been to Sweden, had a friend that lived there as well.
Yeah.
And I got a friend in Japan, so I'm hoping that he can show me around.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like that's because I like the culture. I go there for the culture, for the sights a little bit, but I'm more there to hang out with the people who actually live there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's something where, because of doing trips, both with friends and then by myself, like when you're with friends, you're going to have a great time and you're going to be able to learn things that you might not have been able to get just with the regular tourist type trips. But then there is this realm where you do go by yourself. If you're willing to afford yourself and just be open to whatever experience, you'll have these other experiences that will make you feel, in essence, kind of more connected because you don't have like a security tether to hold on to, you know. So like when I was going around Thailand, I didn't really have anyone there, which I kind of can't recommend to most people, you know, but it's still something where still being able to see all of, see the sites that I did and be able to interact with the people, there was no assumption of how I was going to act. They knew that, oh, this was a one-on-one conversation rather than, oh, okay, well, I'm having a conversation with you, but then what I tell this other person is going to be 100% different. So you get this real interaction with the culture that you might not get when you're with your friends too. So.
I'd like to go back to, let's see. I'd like to go a little bit back to the cosplay because we haven't really talked a lot about that. And if you don't mind, I think you have a very unique vantage point because you're a black cosplayer in Utah. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Is there like a group of black cosplayers that kind of get together, or is it just kind of they're sprinkled in different groups? Like, what does that look like?
It's kind of interesting. So, yes, being a black person in Utah is already like feeling like a unicorn. Mm-hmm. But then when you go and you start throwing this cosplay side to it, you feel like a unicorn, like just a green unicorn with just like sparkly glitter showing out everywhere amongst other unicorns as well. And it's insanity. So like there isn't really like a group of us as much as we all kind of see each other over at cons, and we just sort of go like, hey, what's up? So like Victor Sine is a good friend of mine. Eli Pompadour. We always see each other at all these events like Anime Bonsai or FanX. And it's always just sort of like, we'll kind of see what each other did and whatnot, kind of bounce back and talk with. But like there really isn't so much of a group. Mm-hmm. The only part that is that's interesting to it is that anytime either like a movie like Black Panther shows up or, or something where there's a black character, all of us start getting messages at the exact same time, like, we're going to do this group. Do you want to be our Black Panther? And it's just like, nope. No, I don't. No, I don't. Or like, we'll just sort of do that. Or we'll kind of chat with each other and be like, so how many times did you get asked today? I got asked 5 times. I got asked 3 times and whatnot. So, we wind up kind of like joking around just because we always know, like, we can start seeing in trailers just like, and that's going to start happening, But it also does, as much as we kind of make light of it, we also realize that, for something like if you want to put an Avengers group together and you would like to have a Black Panther there's a lot of people that don't feel that they should or, or they can't for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So thus, it's not like, oh, well, I'm doing this just because it's expected of me. It's more like I'm doing this because no one else really will, and I want other people to have the experience of this character as well. So sometimes we'll also go and like, we'll do these characters for that reason as well. Mm-hmm. So there's that little bit of fun, but yes, we always have to kind of crack wise with each other, just saying like, yeah, okay, well, how you doing? I haven't talked to you in 6 months, but all right. John Stewart. Okay, there we go. We got one. I'll do Cyborg next, Oh.
What's your favorite cosplay?
Whew. Favorite? I knew you were about to say that. So, okay, I've got 2. All right, and they're both foundational, and they're both my favorites at the exact same time. The first one is my Aqualad that I did do with Tui back over here.
Okay.
And we did that maybe, 3 or 4 years ago? Yeah, something like that. And we did it over at FanX. And I did my own version of an Aqualad that was a little more armored. But rather than having like the blonde hair that a lot of people had seen from like Young Justice and whatnot, I decided to just do a mohawk down the center of my head. And that caught a bunch of people's, attention. Also, the fact that I was wearing blue contacts. So that one was fun because so many people just like they saw it and they realized that yes, it was Aqualad, but it was also different than anything else that they had ever seen, and just lost their minds. And then when they saw Tui as Aquaman, it just shut everybody down.
I gotta say too, that is a perfect cosplay for you.
So yeah, like that one definitely has a real special place in my heart and should be done again. So yeah, we'll definitely go and think about that. But then another one that sticks out in my head, like I said, I kind of brought out that Crackbrain. We all like this other company called Rooster Teeth. They're another big content creator group. Well, they make a show that most people might be familiar with called Red versus Blue. And in that series, there's one character, Tucker. He's loud. He's obnoxious. I see a chuckle over here. You know, he is. Oh, it's really hard to describe Tucker, but he's. You love him, but you realize he's a moron and kind of not appropriate. Mm-hmm. So I wound up building an armor set, full cosplay armor, based off of his character, and it took like 7 months to be able to build because I fiberglassed the entire thing. We got out over to Texas. I felt great wearing it. I was like, okay, this is awesome. And then within about 5 minutes, because of that Texas heat in July, everything just slowly kind of started to melt. So all my straps are melting. Parts of everything is kind of coming off. So like the first part of the con, I looked kind of good walking through, but then as you see pictures, you can slowly start seeing armor pieces like falling off and going away. And it was just like, by the end of it, I just had a helmet and a jumpsuit. That was it. So like it was a disaster of a cosplay, but I absolutely loved it.
So are you still doing a lot of cosplay now, or are you kind of paused? Like what's your situation?
So it's not quite a pause as much as it's definitely slowed down a lot. Mm-hmm. Before I used to try to go and do like 3 to 4 cosplays a year. Now I'm doing like 1. And I try to make sure that one that I do is big and there's a lot of stuff to it. So like at the moment I am working on 3 different cosplays. 2 of them are from Red versus Blue again. I'm redoing my Tucker, but I'm doing this one 3D printed with LEDs and some different actuator motorized parts. And then I'm also doing another character from that same series called Locust, which is a character that almost no one does. So that one will be kind of fun. The goal was to have it done this last year for RTX, but COVID happened. So now, thankfully, I've got a whole nother year to put everything together. So there's that. And then the other cosplay that I'm working on is actually based off an indie web comic that's still in production called Captain Zero. And it's actually based off of a black superhero with PTSD. And you can find little glimpses of it over on Twitter, and I've been speaking with the creator for quite a while, and they're in the process of trying to get some animations done of it. But yeah, I'm actually trying to make the actual cosplay of their character, because it's like, okay, you see someone putting their passion into it, and cosplay is a way where I always like to say it's a love letter to the writer or the artist or creator, and it's like getting to see something that just it spawned in your mind and you've been writing it and maybe doing an animation towards it, to see someone else actually put together the entire thing and to wear it is something special. And it's something that us cosplayers, we kind of hold dear, so that's why we try as hard as we can. So that's one, like, I am trying to work on it. I'm trying to do as much care to it, because when it's done, I want them to really look back and be like, that's exactly what I wanted this character to look like. So yeah.
That's what's up. Let me see. I got some more talking points trying to go through. Before we got on air, you were talking a little bit about this Halo Spartan. I don't know anything about like with cosplay and Halo Spartan. Can you talk a little more about that? Like, give our listeners understanding of what that is and what you're doing with that.
So most people are familiar with the game Halo, and all the they're familiar with like Master Chief, the main character and whatnot. Well, the actual like classification of who he is, he's a Spartan. Like his soldier type is a Spartan. So there's various different armor sets that are there with that. So rather than just doing the regular Master Chief that most people do, there's a lot of us that we try doing variations off of whatever might be in the game. So if people are familiar with the Star Wars group, the 501st, there's a Halo group called the 405th. And that's based off of just a bunch of Halo cosplayers. So we all kind of talk and chat, and we're all over the world. And yeah, we actually make all of our own armors. So some of them we'll make from foams, like EVA foam, which is kind of that same spongy foam matte material that like you can find over in like gyms and auto shops and things. And then other ones like myself, where I started out with a process called pepakura. And you take cardstock, you wind up folding it in all these different ways, and then you actually fiberglass it, and it makes it, like, if you put enough fiberglass, it's bulletproof, so it's also heavy as all get out. So, you kind of work with that, and then now I'm kind of getting into the 3D printing side. So, putting these armor sets together, it's something where a lot of cosplayers, they like fabrics, they don't like a lot of these armor pieces, and they're big, they're bulky, and they're hard to work with. But making a Halo Spartan cosplay is kind of a weird badge of honor in itself, because you realize not a lot of people are going to tackle it. And if you can make it look pristine, it catches everybody's eye. There are cosplayers out over there that just, you see it, and you just go like, yep, that literally looks like you could take that thing into space. So it's something fabulous, and I love going and making these really complex armors. So
You excited for the new game?
Oh, yes, I am. So, it's something where Halo, gosh, that was the first Xbox game that I ever really played. And I used to love going over to friend's house, and we'd form LAN parties and just start playing the game. And it was that special time of youth of just like, you're with 8 and 9 of your different friends, you've got multiple systems all hooked up, everyone's screen sharing, and you guys are calling each other the worst names possible. You're staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning. It was a chaotic, fantastic time. So like, it's always got this really special place in my heart. So when they announced Halo Infinite, I was like, all right, here we go. And now seeing the gameplay, it's something where like getting to see the different abilities that weren't there before, getting to see the different weapons that weren't there before. I'm looking at it, and all I see is the possibilities, not just, those graphics don't look, I could care less. Show me something new, and I'm there for you. So
I like that. You're a good fan to the game, because a lot of people have a lot of issues with those graphics.
Oh yeah. If you want to get hung up on, like, here's what I'll say. If you're a comic fan, if you get irritated over graphics, I sit there and go like, why? Every single time your character goes through a different artist, they change the style anyway. You should be used to this. As long as the actual gameplay is similar, that's all you should really care about. Or the storyline, as long as all of a sudden they don't jump and go to something different, which Halo did, so there is that too. But, as long as you still feel that connectivity to it, you should still be good, all right? So, yeah, the graphics are going to do what they're going to do. Okay, I'm a PC player, so my graphics are going to be good anyway.
I need to get me a gaming PC soon. Right now, I'm just on the PS4.
Oh, there you go. Nothing wrong with that.
Oh, I like the PS4. I love it. So, what is something you wish someone would told you now? What is something that you wish someone would told you when earlier in life that would have benefited you now?
The biggest thing that I probably wish I would have listened when people were saying it is, don't be afraid. There's so many different things that will get in front of you as an obstacle, and some people will start rationalizing like, oh, well, I can't go past this because of this. Or I would love to do this, but then there's this. If you can put those away and find a way to get around them, your life is going to be so much more with great experience than you ever could have thought of. Like if you're looking at going to Japan and you're like, oh, it's so expensive, find a way to save money. You'll figure a way to get there, don't let that stop you. Oh, well, I want to start a podcast, but I don't know where to start. Start asking questions, start finding people. Even voice acting. There's tons of people that are always like, I want to get into voice acting, but I don't have the time, I don't have the equipment, I don't have this, I don't have that. I see casting calls all day long, every day. You can record on your phone, and as long as you know how to record the right way, you're good, and time, I mean, I spend maybe 4 to 5 hours a week of actual, like, going through auditions, getting them done, and then editing. And that's for, even in those 4 hours, I'm still getting done like 20 or 30 different auditions, and I might get 1 or 2 of those, and even those, I'm recording over the process of months. So it's not a lot of time, but yet the reward of it, hearing my voice attached to a character, or seeing animations and things like that, it goes far beyond what fear could have kept back from me. So that's the biggest thing that I would tell more people is like, yes, fears are there to kind of keep you in check a little bit. It's not bad to have fears, but don't let a fear stop you from doing something that you ultimately have a passion for, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody.
No, I would definitely agree with that, because I wish someone told me that about 10 years ago or whatever, because I had issues, insecurities and scared of everything, taking the jump. But now that I'm an older man, kind of just don't care. I just want to do what I want to do, and I make those moves.
Yeah, and it's something where there's so many of us that have that realization. I don't even want to say like later in life, because, later 20s, early 30s isn't really later, but if we were to have that same mentality when we were 18, and granted, there are people that do. I've met a ton of different people that they don't let all that stop them. A good example, so with gymnastics and the people that I've kind of helped coach and bring along, there's a gymnast, Sam Mikulik. He's been to the last 4 Olympics, and this next, 2020 was supposed to be his last year. I guess 2021 will be. Seeing Sam from when he was like 12 years old, he never let his fears put any sort of limiter on him. So thus, when he would go to a competition, it was almost like seeing a titan walk onto the floor. Of just like everyone knew, because he was the only person that walked in, knew what he wanted to do, had the passion for it, and was fearless. And thus, because of that, he was able to reach the world level, and going on to the Olympics. So it's like there are people that have that. If more young people were to just understand that, have it, and then have other people encouraging them with that kind of mindset, you'd see so many more highly passionate, highly skilled individuals that can make greater change than everyone that's kind of afraid, and thus we keep on getting caught in these little loops.
Completely agree. And then just kind of switching the page a little bit, where do you see yourself in the community now within like macro, micro, like whether it be like a small community like you're cosplaying or maybe something considered like a larger community where you may be more involved in like nonprofits or other organizations that have like a wider stretch?
Yeah. So I definitely see myself as part of more of the micro community. As much as I do try to be charitable. I've done work for the American Cancer Society all throughout my life, and different other organizations. I really say that I kind of fit more into the micro community, with cosplay or nerddom or in the creative sense. And my role is usually that of like a cheerleader. I'm not really trying to be the one that is, oh, look at me. Like, yes, I've got things that I want to do. So yes, I want to become, a good voice actor. Yes, I'm acting in films and I'm podcasting. I'm doing these things, but I never necessarily am doing it because I want people to look at me. I have more of the mentality of like, no, I want to see other people do it. So yeah, I'm doing it, but it's like, okay, well, I now kind of figured out a couple of tricks. Here, you have the same passion. You do it too, do this that I tried, or maybe we can kind of change it so that way, I did this and ran into a roadblock. Let's get it where you don't run into that same roadblock. So I really try to encourage more people in whatever community I'm a part of like, there's a way to always be a little bit better, a little bit more. If your sights are here, why couldn't it be a little bit higher? Let's see if we can work together and get you there. I don't care if I get there, but if you have your passion there, let's get you there.
Cool. Let's see here. We have a question from the audience real quick. Have you ever had an experience that crushed you spiritually or emotionally? And if so, how did you move forward?
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, of course. Have you ever had an experience that crushed you spiritually, emotionally? If so, how did you move forward?
Yeah, I can definitely kind of talk about that one where, for myself, family is something where it's a lot more than just blood. Because of not growing around like all my cousins and grandparents, those that were around me, like family, friends, and just regular friends, they became aunts and uncles. Like, I would actually refer to them as grandma, grandpa, my cousins, even as close as like, yes, I lived with my mother and father, but my friends behind me, I've been best friends with them since I was 2 years old, but I would call his mom, and actually meant it, where she had chore lists that I didn't live in her house, but I would still have to go over on Thursdays and mow the lawn, because that relationship was real to me. So because of that kind of tie, sometimes losing friends isn't, it doesn't feel like, oh, well, I just lost a friend. It literally kind of feels like I lost a brother or a cousin or an aunt or an uncle. To move that around when my real family does it, it's still like it hits 10 times more. And as much as, like I love my family and I love both my brothers and my mother and my father, one of the things that it was right before I was coming out over to Utah, I was sitting down talking with my father, and we were kind of going over some of the plans, and we're really logical thinkers. I mean, to the point of growing up, we sat down, watched Back to the Future 2, got out a whiteboard and started doing a timeline and just going through like, okay, look, if he did this, this would change this. And like, we are that level of insanity kind of people. But we were sitting down and kind of going back and forth. I had just kind of gotten back from Japan, and, and we were kind of talking, and we just started having a disagreement of the direction that I was doing in my life, because it seemed chaotic. It's like, oh, you left for Japan without so much as a goodbye for most of everyone. You just went up and left, and then you're coming back, and now you're going to Utah of all places where you know nobody. And he said something to me that even to this day, like, it still hurts. Like, we're still close, but it still hurts. And he said, if you think that way, you're not my son, because my son would never say that. And I know what he meant, which is the person he raised to be his son wouldn't think that way. Like, I get that on a logical level, but it still hurts so much that I wound up kind of spiraling as soon as I got out over here to Utah for about a good 6 months. It's just like, it kind of felt like every connection that I had just felt meaningless. So it was hard to make friends because it felt like I didn't have my family. I was already far from them, far from everyone that I knew. And it wasn't until I first had to reestablish who I was. It didn't really go into relying on others. I went, rather than focusing on what I lost, I'm going to figure out about who I am and what I have. And that's where I started realizing all these interests that I kind of had growing up. Yes, I loved them, but I could see snippets of myself, but they were part of someone else. So I started revitalizing things that I knew that were just for me, so I got way back into anime again, and cosplay. Yes, I did it as a kid, but I did it just because my parents kind of did it. Well, then all of a sudden I started doing it a lot more, and I did characters that I never thought I really would have done, and it just started being more about me rather than all these things that I kind of tethered myself to, so we're always going to lose friends, we're always going to lose family, but it's knowing who you are and kind of making sure you're your own anchor before, kind of clinging on to someone else, because you never know what's going to happen with that other person. So.
Yeah, that is a beautiful message. I feel like that's probably a good spot to kind of wrap it up. Let's plug in some links. All right, so do you have anything you would like to promote?
Yeah. So again, if you want to go and see any part of like Cracked Brain, you can find us at thecrackedbrain.com, all one word. That's where you'll find all of our podcasts. You'll find all of our videos, gaming, the shorts that we've done, any like con experiences. They're all there, and we definitely update those a couple times a week. And then from there, if you want to follow me personally, you can find me at that backflip guy, all one word, on pretty much every social media platform. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I stayed away from Snapchat, and I'm thankful for it. And I'm not a TikTok person.
Yeah, I'm too old for that.
Yeah. So yeah, like I'm the kind of person where if you ever have questions about either anything that's happening to me, or just like if I'm doing something and you have questions about like, oh, how'd you do that, or how could I get into that, I'm an open book. Feel free to go and talk to me, and I'll try to reply.
Cool. And this has been an amazing conversation. I want to definitely appreciate you coming here. And with that, I want to thank our sponsors, Rusted Box Records, Watchtower Coffee and Comics, and Black Cat Comics. And then wrapping up as well, one of the things that we do is we give all of our guests a comic book that relates towards their story. We knew that you really loved Aqualad, and Black Cat Comics provided this comic book to present to you.
Right on.
I would normally give you a synopsis, but if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about Aqualad, kind of give our audience a little bit more of an understanding of who that is?
Yeah, so Aqualad is, if he's basically the Robin to what Aquaman actually is. So first you wound up having, Aqualad was Garth, and kind of cool, really heavy into water kinesis and whatnot, but kind of was that Burt Ward-esque type Aqualad. And the Aqualad that I actually like is actually the second iteration of Aqualad. His first appearance was in 2010, but it's Calderon. And one of the coolest parts about Calderon that I kind of briefly talked about earlier was the fact that his father, or in some cases his foster father, was a henchman of Black Manta, or was Black Manta himself. And then his mother was an Atlantean. So similar to Aquaman, he actually is half Atlantean, half human as well. So kind of getting that sort of like you see yourself in your squire was always kind of like a really, really cool interaction. But where Aquaman was able to kind of get past most of his adversity in the water inside Atlantis, Calderon had to face that adversity because of the connections with his father, but then also had to face the interactions that he was facing on land with his mother too. So he kind of got it from both ends, and thus kind of really became this conflicted character, So he's always kind of meant a lot to me, not just as another Black character, but also as a character that had to deal with so much from every angle, and really feeling like, well, a fish out of water. so yeah.
All right, cool. Hopefully you enjoyed that specific comic, and we would love to ask you later on how you thought about it, and we'll just continue the conversation.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Mocha Talk and Caffeine Dreams. Be sure to follow us online at Mocha Talk Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, or on our website at mochatalkpodcast.com. Special thanks to our sponsors, Watchtower Coffee and Comics, Rusted Box Records, and Black Cat Comics. We'll see you on the next episode.